Still trying to soak it all in here today as the Duke basketball season came to a close. We're going to be continuing to talk about that here on Locked On Blue Devils. Another fun show is straight ahead.
Hi, everybody. Dick Vitale. Hey, make sure you listen, man, to Locked On Blue Devils with J.J. Jackson. He's awesome, baby.
You are Locked On Blue Devils, your daily podcast on the Duke Blue Devils, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome into another episode of the Locked On Blue Devils podcast. My name is JJ Jackson. So great to have you here with us on today's show as we're going to be discussing the end of the season for the Duke men's basketball team here today on Tuesday, March 21st, 2023. If you haven't done so already, please be sure to follow and subscribe to Locked On Blue Devils for free wherever you get your podcast. Also, watch us on YouTube each and every day. Hit that subscribe button as well. Joining me on today's show, so excited to bring on my good pal Dustin from the Devil's Den podcast as we will recap the end of the year for Duke season. Dustin, this is always the worst time of the year, knowing that people are having more NCAA tournament conversations and we can't be thinking about a Duke game that's coming up.
Yeah, only 5 times in my life has this ever ended on a happy note, so it's always tough. The end of the year, you're not going to be playing again until, November. And as just a staunch basketball fan, it's just a tough thing to have to deal with. But, as I've grown older, it's become less and less like you don't worry about the success of your season. You don't pin it to a crapshoot like the NCAA tournament. Overall, I thought Duke had a great year. First year coach, won 27 games. But it's always a little disappointing when you especially the way the bracket broke, after Purdue went down.
Oh yeah.
Licking our chops. I mean, it kind of felt like the 2017 tournament all over again, where all we needed to do was get past the second round opponent and probably had a great shot to get to back-to-back Final Fours, but it wasn't in the cards, and we're going to move on.
Massive surprise in the round of 32 game for the Duke Blue Devils as Mark Mitchell did not play. We found out after the game from Scheyer that it was 5 minutes before the game that they found out that Mark would not be involved in this game plan after tweaking his knee on Friday in practice. What was your reaction? Ultimately, what kind of an impact did that have on the game?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of reminded me of the 2019 Sweet 16 game against Virginia Tech where all of a sudden Cam Reddish wasn't going to suit up.
Right.
And it was the same thing. 5 minutes before the game, he tells Coach K, I'm not going to be able to go today. And so it's a tough thing to have. Mark started every game for us this year. Obviously, his impact on the defensive end was missed greatly. I'm not going to butcher the guy's name for Tennessee. But
Olivier, we'll go by the first name.
Yeah, the guy that Mark would have been guarding scored 27 points and he averages 10. He's hit 3 threes in exactly one game all year, and that was Saturday.
Right.
And you have to imagine with an athlete like Mark on him, I'm not going to say he holds him scoreless, but I think he keeps him from 27. We haven't had that done to us all year. So I don't think it can be understated what Mark would have brought to this team. And I know from just my kind of inside sources, John and the team, they were pretty crushed about it. I think that they felt that they would have won that game with Mark.
Fair to say. I mean, ultimately, Duke still had chances to win without
Sure.
him, but ultimately, the unsung hero the entire season continues to be the case. Let's continue to rattle off Olivier's stats to make us feel worse about the outcome. As you mentioned, 27 points, a career high. His last 3 games, his point totals don't even total up to 27. 10
Right.
points per game is his average. 31% three-point shooter. He had never made 3 three-point shots in a single game in his career. You have to total up the last 6 games before you see a stretch of 3 made shots, and he did it all in one game against Duke. I mean, look, those are the performances any team looks like if you're trying to go on a big run, and you're exactly right. Tip your cap to him.
That's all you can do at the end of the day. Yeah, I mean, look, we've had this kind of stuff happen to us before where one guy just gets hot, but the guy in 22 minutes of play, I mean, he puts up those kind of points, and I think he was 10 of 13 overall from the field. Duke, obviously, we had our chances. The game was very physical, as I'm sure we'll get into. But we had a 19-13 lead or something like that with about 8 minutes to go. And then, as we've talked about on this podcast before, the scoring drought kind of crept up on us again. And over those last 8 minutes, we were only able to score 2 more points and finish the half with 21. So just overall, not our best performance. We finished with 15 turnovers. Yeah, we had been cutting that back a lot, but you got to give credit to Tennessee. Their game plan was to come out and be physical. I think Rick Barnes said we want them to fill us on every possession. Unfortunately, the refs allowed it to be that physical, which again we'll probably get into. But at the end of the day, you got to fight through it, and we weren't able to do it. So tip your caps to Tennessee, and they're moving on, and we're going to be trying to figure out how to put the pieces together for next year.
Yeah, that's right. Dustin, we always talk. I would consider you one of the many human versions of a Duke basketball encyclopedia, right? And so, unfortunately, you didn't have a fun tidbit to add to your memory with Duke having their lowest point total in a first-half NCAA tournament game ever. I mean, 21 points.
Yeah, and
in a first half. Never done before.
Never done before. And, look, Jon's a great coach. Obviously, this year we struggled offensively at times. Under Coach K, the defense was always a little – well, I won't say always, but in the last decade or so, the defense was always a little sketchy. But the offense, it didn't matter who we had. We always had a top 5, top 10 offense. And so that was never a problem. Like I brought up the 2017 game, we played South Carolina in Columbia, South Carolina. I don't even want to get into how we're the 2 seed playing a 7 seed an hour from their house. But those guys scored 65 points on us in the second half. And that was the year that our 1 seed had lost. We were the 2, and we pretty much had a cakewalk to the Final Four that year if we just got through that game. And unfortunately, it just didn't happen. We haven't been able to take advantage of those breaks.
It was the day for Tennessee. They went 65-52 over our Duke Blue Devils. The season comes to a close for Jon Scheyer in year 1 of his tenure as Duke men's basketball head coach. We'll take our first time out of the show, and our program will continue here in a moment. Locked On Blue Devils is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. The #1 sportsbook in America is heating up, and you should be too, as the NCAA tournament continues to move forward. It's called March Madness after all, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel because new customers get a no-sweat first bet for up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with the same game parlay. So don't miss your chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 and bonus bets back when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Moving forward here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils, JJ Jackson alongside my pal Dustin Shue, one of the co-hosts for the Devil's Den podcast. Dustin, we're talking more about this game for Duke, taking on Tennessee, a round of 32 exit for the Blue Devils. Some of the frustrating and disheartening numbers for Duke offensively would be 1, the turnovers, 15 turnovers compared to just 8 that Tennessee had in the game, or 9, excuse me. And then only 6 offensive rebounds for Duke.
Yeah, obviously all year long we've been really stellar on the boards. We've out-rebounded opponents in pretty much every game. And so coming into this tournament with the way we had been playing defense, the way that we rebound, the way we had recently been taking care of the ball, I thought that made us less upset-proof than we would be, in normal years. Obviously, that 5-12 matchup with Oral Roberts, there was a lot of people, really taking Oral Roberts over
many people.
Yeah, and like I said, because of those things, I felt pretty well going into that game, and that game was over in the first 8 minutes. But against Tennessee, credit to those guys. I think in the game, their first game against Louisiana, they had like 18 turnovers. So without their point guard, I thought that we would be able to pressure them and kind of cause some havoc on that end. And we just weren't able to do it. And maybe it was a byproduct of Mark not being there and having less bodies to kind of run in and out. So we weren't able to really play that pressure that we wanted to. But the other thing, I mean, like I said, it was, even the ESPN guys or the CBS analysts kind of hinted at halftime. It looked more like a football game.
Right.
I think Seth Greenberg had even said that he texted some NBA scouts during the game, and they were like, this looks like 80s NBA basketball. Yeah. Like, I'm just waiting on somebody to punch somebody in the face and then call it a regular foul, And the other thing is that's the way it was allowed to be officiated. I mean, they started calling fouls early on, but I think Tennessee was only whistled for 4 fouls in the last 26 minutes of action. When you're playing that physical, to only be whistled for 4 fouls, I'm not blaming it on the refs again, but their group of older guys were a lot of 18-year-olds, and they kind of just out physicaled us and outmanned us, and it is what it is.
Yeah, no, I mean, let's talk about that. Let's talk about the officiating in this. Let's talk about the physicality, because I think it so much so sums up the game that took place. If you're watching us here on YouTube, you can see the team stat comparisons right here in front of you on the screen. 17 fouls called against Duke, just 11 against Tennessee. I don't want to be that guy, but let's talk about the physicality that's in place, because Dustin, in the first 5-6 minutes of the game, we're already seeing 2 reviews on whether or not a flagrant foul was in place. I mean, Filipowski gets swiped out from underneath the basket, and then ultimately ends up a little bit later catching an elbow to the face, and it requires some medical treatment.
Cut man,
I mean,
poor Flip. I mean, geez, it's like we need a boxing cut man in our corner for Flip alone. I mean, he has taken a beating this year, but testament to him. I mean, the kid's been a warrior. He came right back in and played. He didn't have his best game, but again, I think that was a byproduct of them being so physical. And when you're allowed to cut and hold, and in the NBA, there's freedom of movement. You're not allowed to bump cutters and stuff like that, but when you're grabbing and pulling, especially, we couldn't even get dribble handoffs going. I mean, they really disrupted our offense in that way. And it shows in the way we shot, the way we turned it over. It was just they muddied it up, mucked it up. And like I said, credit them. They were allowed to do it. I wish it wouldn't have been that way. But again, once that kind of happens, you've got to kind of, hey, if the refs aren't going to call it, then we need to be that aggressive too. In the same token, it's got to be frustrating for a guy like Flip, who's getting grabbed, he's getting punched, he's getting elbowed. So then he makes a strong move to the basket. A guy is riding his hip and then slides in front of him, and he gets an offensive foul.
Ridiculous.
And so you're like, well, what do you want me to do? Shoot half court hook shots? What am I supposed to do?
Right. One of those plays you could see on Kyle Filipowski, and you could read his lips saying he was still moving, like he was already falling down, talking to the official, and still.
Yeah, and then that was a big play because I believe they came on the other end, got a 3, and then we get a moving screen on our end, and you see Jon say, literally, he's telling the refs, that's every play. Right. Like, if you're going to call it every play, but don't just call it on us.
Right.
Which
absolutely.
Was I'll check my language on this podcast, sure. But it just, like I said, man, I thought it was not the greatest officiated game, and honestly, that's kind of the reason the college basketball is a little bit unwatchable at some points. I mean, these refs this year across the board have just been terrible.
65-52, the final score. Tennessee defeats the Duke Blue Devils. Duke's year is done after the first season that Jon Scheyer was the head coach. Talking about this Duke team in particular and what they were able to accomplish on Saturday, a bright spot would absolutely be the play of Tyrese Proctor.
Oh, he was incredible. I mean, I don't know where we would have been. We might not have hit 50 without him. I mean, obviously in the second half, he was just kind of getting to wherever he wanted to go, had that, little scoop layups, pull-ups. I mean, his 3-point shot really came on at the end of the year. Tyrese, hopefully, I know they're going to be going through some things in the next couple of weeks. There's going to be meetings with the coaches and, evaluations, but I'd love to have a sophomore Proctor, and I think we will see a sophomore Proctor, which really bodes well for our chances next year.
Yeah, I'm so excited. Like, I'm not – I know that's time. Like, this is what we discuss over the last few weeks, right? We're not ready for the season to come to a close because that means you've got to start having the conversations about whether or not your freshmen are going to come back for another season. And Duke's got a big group of freshmen that are going to have to make that decision. But yet here we are. Those are the cards that we were dealt. And Tyrese Proctor just made like pro plays. Like that's what you could say. Some of his dribble moves, he had a crossover behind the back, like 1 foot jumper, free throw line extended that he made in the second half. I mean, it was just silly, the shots that he was making.
I mean, Tyrese Proctor is a pro. He will be an NBA player. Just for me, I think he needs another year. He needs to get a little stronger. He needs to work on his bursts, a little bit more explosiveness. Obviously, you want to see that 3-point shooting keep trending up. As it stands, the scouts looking at his 3-point shooting collectively, 30%, 32% doesn't really stick out. So if he can come back and, continue that trend, especially later on the year, and not dig himself into an 11% hole that he started out in, I think he'll be able to make himself quite a bit of money by doing so.
Without a doubt, super excited to see what that could look like for Proctor and those conversations to continue. Talking about the Duke offense, Proctor was the bright spot, but the physicality, I think, really altered what Duke was trying to do against Tennessee. I often think about looking back on that game, like the post was not there. There weren't very many post touches taking place for Duke basketball in that game against Tennessee.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at your stats here, I mean, Derek Lively didn't even attempt a shot. I don't even know if he looked at the rim on offense. We weren't able to get him any of those lobs. But again, that's a testament to the way Tennessee was playing. They were, their bigs were physical. And so the best shot for us probably wasn't something in the paint. I think Jeremy, to his credit, tried to get in the paint a couple times and it was denied. And so, again, you just got to tip your cap to Tennessee. That was their game plan. They stuck by it. They were allowed to do it, and they're moving on. And we'll regroup and hopefully come up with a better plan for next year.
Yeah, just 4 minutes for Ryan Young in this one, and he was known for some post touches throughout the season. Flip didn't get any touches down there. Lively's offensive game doesn't necessarily warrant those. Not a single shot attempt in 30-plus minutes of action for Lively. I mean, it was just – and then the Mark Mitchell factor, right? Yep. We talk about his offensive game isn't going to wow you, but I think at this point, given the fact he didn't play for the first time all season, if he decides to come back for a sophomore season, Duke fans are going to be so thrilled to think about what a sophomore Mark Mitchell could look like.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not going to jump the gun, but I think we can, expect Proctor and Mark Mitchell back. They're not really on any mocks right now. Now, that's not to say that they won't leave. I mean, we've had plenty of guys not on mocks that decided that school wasn't for them, and let's go ahead and get on to the next stage. But I believe that we'll see those two guys back at least, and hopefully with a Flip returning. Flip he has a decision to make. He can be an NBA player. I think he needs to work on his efficiency. We've talked about, obviously the raw stats. He rebounds well. He scores. He needs to be a little bit more efficient. Needs to up that 3-point percentage, cut down some of the turnovers. I think if Flip returns, man, you could be looking at an all ACC type, player, ACC player of the year type guy, maybe even a first or second team All-American, which would move him up into that lotto range and really get the guy paid.
That's where he wants to be, for sure.
Yep.
That's exactly where he wants to be. So, taking a look at what the Duke team could look like next year, a lot of decisions set to be made. Thinking back on this year and thinking back about how seasons come to a close, I think it will be special, the run this team made to win the ACC Tournament Championship. There certainly were some big moments. And look, it was just the first year of something new. 42 seasons that Mike Krzyzewski was the head coach, and we experienced something different this year.
Yeah, I don't think it can be understated, the job that John done. I mean, he was literally handed a blank slate of a roster. I mean, you inherit one guy back from last year. I mean, Jalen Blakes came back, but I think Jalen played less than 100 minutes last season total.
Right.
So you're inheriting one guy, and obviously had the full year to build this roster. But to bring in 11 new guys, 7 of them freshmen, and to hang a banner, I mean, I'm as ecstatic. I'm as happy as can be for John for being able to do that.
Tell me a little bit about the Devil's Den podcast, Dustin. What do you guys have going on?
Yeah, so we just recorded, I guess our season wrap up would have been Sunday night. We'll probably be putting that out Tuesday morning, Wednesday. That's all dependent on producer Raul and when he gets around to getting all that stuff ready to go. But, we'll probably kind of tone it down here and take a little break over the next couple of weeks. It just won't be a lot going on. Obviously, the NBA Combine is going to be coming up, and we'll have guys that are probably look to test the waters. So we'll probably chillax a little bit on putting out pods for a little while, but we'll be back and just talking Duke hoops. So you can find us wherever you find your podcast.
I love that. I love it. Dustin Shoe on Twitter as well, at Dustin_Shoe. Follow us on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button. I'm rocking a thank you, Coach K hoodie here today, recognizing the 5 championships. For people that are listening to us, tell me about this hoodie you've got on here, Dustin.
Oh, you like, so this was my when Kyrie had the SpongeBob line that came out. I sat in line like a 10-year-old for like 2 hours at the Foot Locker to grab a couple pair of Kyrie SpongeBobs, and I had to get the SpongeBob
That's
hoodie
awesome.
to go with it.
I love that. Make sure you check all that out. And we love supporting the Dukies, and Duke merchandise is something that you and I are both guilty of purchasing way too much of, probably.
Yeah, don't want to get I hope the wife doesn't hear this.
Yeah, we got more purchases to be made in the future for sure. So the off season is here. The transfer portal is already buzzing. I mean, it's time for us to jump into that season, right?
Yeah, I mean, right now it's just looking to see what we're gonna be working with for next year. Like I said, if we can build that foundation, we know we got 5 freshmen coming in, really talented guys. Ryan Young announced that he will be back. So if we can just keep a couple of those core guys, man, I would feel really great about where we're going to be at heading into next season.
Duke basketball is going to be a lot of fun, and we're going to have a lot more conversations coming your way in the coming weeks. Dustin, as always, it's such a joy to see you. Thanks for being on the show.
Anytime, JJ.
That's my pal Dustin Shoe joining us here on Locked On Blue Devils today. Again, go support the Devil's Den podcast. That's going to do it for today's show. I'll be back at it tomorrow. Thank you and good day.